The Booker Prize is, in my opinion, the most prestigious book award in the world. And in just a few short weeks, 13 books will be announced as the long list. Booker enthusiasts will say it's not technically 13 books, it's a book a dozen. It could be 12 or 13. Yeah, and Musk and Bezos could work together to solve poverty and financial inequality too. And if you're upset that things just got political, you're following the wrong book prize. In this video, I'm going to try and predict the long list, but I am limiting my prediction to books that I have already read and can attest to the quality of. Traditionally, booktubers will make a video where they just speculate on books they've not actually read, and I'm going to make that video too. It is coming soon just after this one, because that is a fun way to build a TBR. But today, it's about strong books that I think fit into the Booker style and fit with the judges' tastes. And that's what we've got. So I want to acknowledge that authors such as Patricia Lockwood and Ian McEwan, who have written books that are yet to be published, which are eligible and definitely worth considering. I would love to have read those books to be able to comment on whether I think they would make the long list or not. I can't include them in this video. There are also books like Endling by Maria Riva, which I just haven't got to yet. And in the case of Endling, I'm planning to read it in July with my Patreon book club. So right now, I'd just like to say thank you to my wonderful patrons for their support. And if you'd like to support the channel too, why not consider signing up and reading this wonderful book with us? Reading the book is optional. Anyway, let's get on with the predictions. And the first book that I'm going to predict will make the long list this year is Nesting by Roshan O'Donnell. This is simply a fantastic book about Kira, a woman leaving an abusive but not violent relationship. She is pregnant, she has 2 children and no money. Her family is in England, while she is living in Ireland, and as such she's separated from them, and she has to contend with the Irish housing crisis, their system of support for women who flee, the legal system, and just been broke. Along the way, her mother-in-law reminds her exactly what part of hell she is destined for, and her husband swings from declaring he loves her and will make it all work to threatening her with all sorts of legal Armageddon. O'Donnell is great at humanizing the situation. Kira didn't wake up in a coma lucky to be alive. She isn't the victim of hardcore domestic violence. But that doesn't mean she's not the victim of abuse. And there is this great minimizing of her situation in Kira's thoughts. There is the question of, are her actions fair? And if you're reading this and wondering about your own situation, of course they're fair. In fact, it doesn't matter if they're fair or not. It's more important that everybody feels safe. But the confusion and the conflict going through Kira's head is just so easy to understand. It is so easy to get inside her head. The character work in this novel is just intense. Kira has to come to terms with the world around her. She is an Englishwoman living in Ireland, and her main contact with the world has been her husband. And she is beginning to realize that she harbors a lot of views about Ireland, and she doesn't know what is true and what isn't, because they've all come from one fairly unreliable source. So she's slowly undoing that programming throughout the novel. Ryan, her husband, is also a very well constructed character. As we see Kira grow, we learn more about Ryan, his manipulation, his desire to control Kira, all the things he has done, and it's very effective writing. But not only does it build Ryan, it allows Kira to grow and develop. In the same sentence that Ryan is being built, Kira is also being built. O'Donnell understands Ryan's struggles and motivation. Authors have to empathize with all the characters in their writing, and O'Donnell has. That doesn't mean she needs to be kind towards him or like him, but with that act of empathy, she's able to understand him and better represent him on the page. Obviously, big themes around control, coercion, domestic abuse, and the system of support available to people who flee domestic living arrangements have. They're all explored brilliantly and in a nuanced level of detail. But honestly, it is the way that the characters resonate with the themes that makes this book brilliant. It's the growth of Kira that gives us so much insight into the themes and the realities of the situation. These are themes that are done a lot in the sort of literature I read, and O'Donnell is doing them in her own way better than anybody else. This book is just too polished to be a debut novel. She is surely worthy of being longlisted or shortlisted or even winning this prize. Nesting was longlisted for the Women's Prize this year, and I am going to give the Women's Prize 2 Booker berths in my prediction. The other one is going to The Dream Hotel by Layla Lalame. In a way, this is a bit of an outsider for the Booker because it is a speculative novel. It is a book that really prioritizes its plot. This is a world when you can go to jail if you are deemed at risk of committing a crime. I think that is such an excellent idea to explore. A lot of people think of jail as some sort of punishment. Now, I'm pretty liberal with my views on jail. I don't care about punishing people. I care about keeping everybody else safe. So in a way, I only want to lock up those who are a threat, which is very similar to this book. You know, my idealized views are if you've committed a crime, but aren't a risk of hurting somebody again, I think you probably need to do something positive and improve the society you live in to make recompense. But I don't think you need to go to jail. Now, I did call that an idealized view, and Lalame is directly challenging the system I have put forward, showing me nice ideas, but what are the practical problems with the solution? What are the issues that any such system would need to solve? And I love that they're 2 different questions. One is being critical of it, and one is looking to lift it up. And it's just a discussion around the themes. It lacks the judgment, but you can use it to judge if you so wished. And this is the sort of thing I love in good speculative fiction. We simultaneously look at a world that doesn't exist, and we're comparing it to a world that does exist. And we're doing it all with one world created in this book. And this world is, on one hand, very unrealistic, and on the other, way too close for comfort. This is told through the story of a mother, Sarah, who is sent to prison because she is deemed a risk of committing a crime. During her time in prison, Sarah faces several setbacks, and the wait due to a period of assessment, which she was told would likely be 4 weeks, grows longer and longer, and she is missing out on her babies becoming toddlers. Her husband is under undue stress to look after the family, to provide her emotional support and to earn the money, and he has so little time left over for her with everything else he needs to look after. Sarah is constantly being told she needs to conform to get out, but as the weeks extend into months and she faces unfair setback after unfair setback, she starts to be seduced by the idea that agitating might be the best way out of prison. Through the growth of Sarah, Lalame is showing us what it takes to challenge the belief in a system that you are living in and the stress and the conflicts it causes when she tries to convince other people of the injustice of the system that they believe in. This is an imaginative piece that stokes your imagination. If you look at my previous prediction videos for any book prize, not just the Booker Prize, you will see that I very, very rarely predict books by Aussie authors. So I hope you don't dismiss what I'm about to do now as regional bias. I'm about to predict not just one Aussie, but 2 Aussie authors getting longlisted this year. And I'm going to start with Juice by Tim Winton. This is a novel that I've previously been critical of, but honestly, read a sentence of this book any sentence, it doesn't matter which one, and you will soon see why I rate it as a book worthy of being Booker longlisted. Winton has a knack for evocative prose, and to that extent, Juice is his best work yet. It's gritty poetry on a page. It isn't pretty, but it's not meant to be. Another dystopian novel, and let me assure you that after I finish discussing this, we are done with dystopian novels. This is a climate fiction novel where anything between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn are too hot and dry to sustain life. A gnarly Mad Max-esque style world in which one man with a child finds a cave for shelter, but there is another man there, and they are figuring out if they can trust one another. To do that, they tell each other their stories. Stories of spies and betrayal, activism and terrorism, villainous multinational companies, and their zealous hired goons. Ultimately, this really is a book about the setting, about the world, and Winton is showing us a world where we haven't tackled climate change, where neoliberalism continues to reign and run unchecked, and companies continue to act without regulations and do whatever they want. Only there have been more years to normalise their actions and creep and creep. Winton creates a harrowing future, and if you've read Tim Winton before, you will know he's a very passionate environmentalist. But this book isn't celebrating nature. This book is much more a plea for action, a warning against inaction. And just like Lalami's novel before him, it's equally distant from our reality and eerily close to it. A novel for those of you who love prose and setting. The other Aussie book I'm predicting is Eating Glassy by Melissa Lukashenko. Now, because I'm an Aussie, I've had the luxury of being able to read this one well and truly before it has been released to the rest of the world. But One World is publishing it in the UK on the 2nd of September, and One World has a great history with the Booker Prize. Marlon James, Paul Beattie and Paul Lynch have all had their Booker-winning novels published by One World, so it's fair to say they have a good eye for a book that might do well on this prize. This novel has two timelines, set 5 generations apart, a modern timeline and one dating from when Brisbane was known as Eden Glassy, a novel that really captures the change in Indigenous life and identity and the modern day Indigenous rage. Winona is such an angry character, but equally she is so likeable. Her rage is superficially funny, but deeply tragic and sad. The construction of her character is simply magnificent from Lukashenko. Her realities of being a black woman in Australia is very different to that of Dr. Johnny, a man who has only just realised recently that he has an Indigenous past and is longing to reconnect to it, to figure out who he is and where he sits between the world of black fellas and white fellas. And Winona is even angry that Johnny has been able to live as white and not face the struggles of being black. And all the resentment and the hostility makes the romance between the two even more delightful and playful. And it feels like Lukashenko is paying tribute to all the fierce black women that she knows. The angry women that are so vulnerable and caring under the surface. The earlier timeline is also a romance between Mulanian and Nita, but in a time where their people still outnumber the British settlers. This timeline gives us a much better understanding of the colonial past of Australia and links in with that of the later timeline through identity and culture. It's kind of crazy to think that Aboriginal people have lived in Australia for the last 60,000 years at least, and I know there have been some big changes in that time, but just look at how much that has changed in the last 200 years, and it's just crazy in comparison to think that they've been here 300 times longer than that. And through Dr. Johnny, we see an Indigenous man who has lost his connection to the land, and that is something that is so unthinkable to Melanian and Nita. Maybe this says something more about my reading and the books that I have to select from, but another country where I've read multiple amazing books from in the last 12 months is, I guess, pretty unsurprisingly, island. I mean, because they are incapable of writing a bad book. I've already discussed nesting, but I have a few more. It's going to be a very green booker this year, if I am correct. The City Changes Its Face by Emma McBride. This is the sequel to The Lesser Bohemian, and I would recommend reading those books back to back. But I do think that this book stands on its own and could be read on its own and would make the prize. I think it's strong enough that you don't need to read the prequel. McBride utilises a very unconventional style of prose, breaking all the rules and delivering something that can be challenging to read, but can also hit you with the raw emotions her characters are feeling. And McBride puts her characters through a lot. The novel catches up with lovebirds Ellie, 20, and Stephen, 40, as Stephen is about to reconnect with his child Grace, 17, as she visits London from Canada for the first time since she left the country as a child. If you have read The Lesser Bohemians, you will know that Stephen has a traumatic past, and what he went through and all that sort of stuff. You don't just heal from that and move on. And Stephen is haunted by the words of his abuser. You're just like me, you'll see. Determined not to prove those voices in his head correct, Stephen lives in fear that he will hurt his daughter Grace, and by virtue of Grace and Ellie only being 3 years apart in age and getting on really well, Stephen's desire not to touch and hurt Grace bubbles over into Ellie. Their expressive, passionate and sexual relationship struggles to deal with Stephen as he learns how to navigate being around his teenage child. Told through Ellie's point of view, this is not just a novel about the impact of trauma on people trying to live a life, but Ellie is left feeling insecure about how Stephen feels towards her due to it. It shows a relationship, and it shows the struggle of loving somebody who has been abused. And that is not to mention the fact that Ellie has also come from a troubled past. The emotions, the characters, and the relationships in this book really start to hit you hard, and McBride's short prose goes from difficult to read to the icing on the cake as you become accustomed to her unusual but very evocative style. Let Me Go Mad in My Own Way by Elaine Feeney. I'm a massive fan of Elaine Feeney and her ability to tell a story. Her last novel, How to Build a Boat, is probably my favourite book of the 2020s so far. Could we just call them the 20s, or are you going to think Flappers and The Great Gatsby if I start saying that? So maybe I'm being a little bit biased towards this book as I think Elaine Feeney is wonderful. Then again, maybe I'm correct and she's every bit as wonderful as I think she is. Claire moves back to her home in the west of Ireland from London to be with her father as his health declines. One day Tom, her ex, turns up living in the area. Tom, who wouldn't go with her to the west of Ireland to see her family when they were together, now lives in her hometown. This is a novel about grief and resilience, knowing what you want and returning to a community and returning to a potential lover. But this is a multiple storyline novel, and there is something else going on. We see pieces of a family in the 1920s Irish War of Independence, and from the 1980s we see a relationship struggling with poverty and domestic violence. Through this we see the impacts of intergenerational trauma on Claire and her family. Ultimately, this is a novel about coming to terms with your past in order to embrace your future. It is a novel that is really dark in places, but also really healing in other places. It is life, and life is a mixture of things. And this also is a mixture of genres: romance, historical fiction, domestic fiction, coming of age, family saga. To be honest, I think Feeney is a real love her or hate her author. But Roddy Doyle, Ayobami Adebayo, Kylie Reid, I can see all three of them being in the love camp. And the fact that I'm in the love camp is the reason I'm predicting this wonderful novel. Moving on from Irish authors to an author who claims that she was inspired by Irish authors. The Name by Florence Knapp. Cora, a mother, is taking Maya, her daughter, and her newborn, yet to be named son, to the registrar's office. to name him? Will it be Gordon, after his father, a local doctor and well-respected man within the community, a name that keeps with a family tradition? Will it be Julian, the name Cora wants, something to break with tradition and allow him to be his own man? Or will it be Bear, the name her 9-year-old daughter Maya would like? One storyline splits into three names, 3 stories. And I have to be honest, I only read this book because I'm a bit of a book slut. It didn't sound like a fantastic book to me, but when you get into it, it's really engrossing and I absolutely adored it. What I didn't realize with that sort of blurb is that Gordon is a controlling figure. Actually, he's flat out an abusive prick. He has a massive impact upon the family, and that completely changes who Bear, Julian and Gordon are. This is a novel exploring nature versus nurture, but it is also exploring domestic abuse and the impact of it. It's about role models and being loved. It's about what sort of men do we want in the world and how do we raise boys? How do we influence the boys that we have to grow up to be the men that we want to see in this world? Florence Knapp has had to recreate the same character 3 times, but they're all different, and it's not just Gordon, Bear, Julian she's had to create. She's had to create Maya 3 times, for example. Add to that the 3 different storylines that she has to ensure impact upon each other, that they're relevant to each other, and this becomes a very complicated novel that is technically very hard, and she pulls it off really well. It's an absolute triumph. It is a great novel, and it really fits into the themes of domestic and gendered violence that I'm putting together in this long list, which is why I think we really need to include We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwell Brown. I mean, that's not the only reason I'm predicting Colwell Brown will make the long list. This book is nothing short of amazing, and out of all my predictions, this and Nesting are the ones I am most confident about. I just reviewed this incredible book in my last video, so you can click on that one for a little bit more detailed review of it, but here's a quicker version. This is a book written in a Yorkshire dialect, which adds such a sense of character and place to this book. But really, it's a book about 2 things: friendship and the exploitation of women, or maybe the value placed upon them. We Pretty Pieces of Flesh. The title is not subtle. The story of 3 teenage girls who are tight friends, but by the time they're 29, they are no longer. One has moved to America and is married. The other 2 still live in Doncaster, but they are no longer close. What has caused this rift? Do friends just grow apart, or did something happen? And as we learn about the women, we learn about the sexual assaults, the gendered violence, and the simple mistreatment at the hands of men that they have received, and received by virtue of the fact that they are women and nothing else. And that serves to colour their world, to colour the characters in this novel, the relationships, and it's simply just the reality of their lives. A brutally raw and feminist novel that is very hard to see missing the long list. 5 books to go, and I want to take a little segue here to discuss the 5 judges for this year's prize. They're the ones that are actually going to be picking the books, so let's see if we can learn a little bit about them. Roddy Doyle is the chair of the judge, acclaimed Irish author with 19 books, 11 for adults and 8 for children, as well as 7 plays and countless short stories. Doyle previously won the Booker Prize in 1993 with his novel Paddy Clark, Ha Ha Ha, and I think he is an excellent choice as either judge or chair. Nigerian author Ayobami Adebayo was longlisted for the Booker Prize with her second novel, A Spell of Good Things, in 2023. She was shortlisted for the Women's Prize with her first novel, Stay With Me. She was also judge of the Women's Prize last year, and if her impact upon this long list is to add novels that are anything like the ones she writes, I will be a very happy reader. American actor Sarah Jessica Parker ruffled some feathers when she was announced, but she is deeply involved in the publishing world. She is a book lover, and there is usually an actor on the judging panel. So personally, I'm not too upset with this one. Actually, I'm not upset with this one at all. There have definitely been worse judges over the years than Sarah Jessica Parker. I think maybe the size of her profile has made her more controversial. Chris Powers is a literary critic who has worked for The Guardian and the BBC. Literary critics, I think, are the perfect judges because, that's their job. My only hesitation is I just don't know him and am ultimately unfamiliar with his reading taste, so I only approve of him if he likes good books. Powers has also written one novel and one short story collection. The final judge is Kylie Reid, who is best known for her debut novel Such a Fun Age, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020 and is a book that I really loved. However, I didn't get along with her second book anywhere near as much, so hopefully she is on the lookout for books more like her first than her second. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time she's involved in judging a book prize at all, and I'll be interested to see the influence that she has upon the long list. Overall, I think this is an excellent choice of judges. A strong literary presence, ex-Booker alumni, people from different backgrounds, 3 authors who have produced books that I have loved reading. Normally, I look at the Booker Prize with a mixture of hope and fear, and that's the case this year too, but definitely the hope is outweighing the fear this year, and that is definitely not always the case. Moving on to the last 5 books now. Audition by Katie Kitamura. Kitamura is a very interesting author. Every time I read a book by her, I feel like I'm missing something and need to reread it to fully appreciate it. Yet I always find her works intriguing and thought-provoking. I think this is going to be one of the more popular novels to predict too, as Roddy Doyle has gone on record as saying, Katie Kitamura really is the business. He likes her books. Now, if every author I liked made the long list, it would be considerably longer than 13 books, and that would be without accounting for the opinions of the 4 other judges that I would have to share the long list with. So I don't think Doyle liking her work is a free pass to the long list, but it's certainly not a bad sign. And I think, considering the other books in my long list, this balances things out nicely, and it's definitely good enough to be long-listed. An elegant older woman and an attractive young man meet at a restaurant for lunch. He is young enough to be her son, but what is their relationship? Clandestine lovers, mother and son? Is it purely professional? Are they friends? Is he her muse? Is she his mentor? Kitamura is exploring relationships, love, exploitations, the sacrifices we make for the people we love and the roles we play. This is a real literary beast of a novel. Even as I say the roles we play, I'm thinking, oh, is that why she decided to make her protagonist an actress? And this is why I think I need to reread this novel, because Kitamura does these things. Now, I guess it's likely that you're able to grasp a little bit more than me when you read a book, and I only really begin to understand a book when I ask myself questions about it. But there's a lot of little elements like this scattered throughout this book, which when you come across them on their own, you think, wow, that's cute. I like that she did that, but it doesn't really change your opinion overall of the novel. But when you start to see all those little pieces, all those little things she's done, it really does become a work of art. The novel is broken into 2 parts, and while they have all the same characters, they feel really disjointed, which will put some readers off. But that disjointed feeling is key to me to understanding the book. It is key to start pondering the themes and the hidden meaning and to start asking questions. And the disjointed feeling is the lecturer at the front of class asking you what you thought of the novel. And if you've got a book club with some really smart cookies, this is a great novel for that. But if you're a book hedonist, you could find this one a little bit dry. It's definitely on the categories of books that improve upon examination. While this is a more traditional, high concept sort of literary fiction novel, I love that Kitamura allows you to connect with the protagonist's emotions too. We see her insecurities, her frustrations, and her fears, and that is the element of this novel that for me elevates it. Without those aspects, this book would be intellectualizing life too much for me. Highbrow literature often forgets that issues need to relate to humans. You cannot discuss human struggle on a sheer logical basis. And Kitamura provides logic, and that's fine, because she also provides the human, which makes it really well rounded. I wanted to include a couple of more plotty novels, and I've got two, including one that I think is a really left field choice coming up. But before that one, I want to discuss Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkinson. Charmaine Wilkinson writes such wonderful, well-rounded novels. When I'm reviewing a book, I always come back to the same 5 elements: plot, character, themes, setting, and prose. These are the things that people typically enjoy when they're reading. You might enjoy some aspects more than others, but these are the things that people enjoy. And Wilkinson is that sort of complete author who is doing all 5 elements well. You're safe in her hands, and she's producing something that is both commercially and literarily satisfying. The son of a black family in a wealthy white neighborhood is murdered in a home invasion gone wrong. Along the way, a priceless earthen jar is shattered. Nobody is ever charged with the crime, and it becomes one of the most high-profile unsolved crimes in America. Years later, Ebby, the daughter of the family, has, much to her chagrin, achieved a B or a C level sort of fame, meaning that her engagement is a little bit of local celebrity gossip. And when her planned marriage falls apart, she is back in the news as part of a high-profile breakup. Ebby decides to flee to France to escape things. Wilkinson is combining multiple ideas for a story into one and creating this real complex discussion of ideas. The earthen jar has been in the family for generations and provides the Freemans with a link back to their family's slave or even African roots. But it's also a member of the family, appearing in a photo wearing a hat. The Freemans talk to it. This one jar is a massive metaphor. Yes, sure, it is a link to their roots, but it's also a friend and a family member, a representation of silliness and fun. It's a spiritual connection, and it is something that has been robbed from them. We have a well-off black family trying to make it in white society. This lends itself to an exploration of racism, nepotism, family ties, and so on. Then we have this post-breakup pseudo or anti-relationship novel going on, Ebby and her love life. There is an unsolved murder mystery, a cold case, and there are so many different elements in this novel, and they're all done fantastically. On their own, they would all make a good novel, but together they just sing. This is a great novel that is more than the sum of its parts, and I really struggle to see anybody disliking it. It's delivering so many different things as well. I just can't see a reader picking this up and saying, nah, it's not for me. Model Home by River Solomon. This is a left field choice I foreshadowed before, and I acknowledge it's very left field. I look at my friends who have read this book and they all love it. But those people that have read this book, while they all do read literary novels, they're very happy reading genre fiction and speculative fiction. And while the book often contains a surprise or two, this would be a big surprise. But it is also a really good book. And look, I don't think anybody else will predict River Solomon to be on the long list. And I think a few people will ignore this prediction or even say, Scott, can I have one of what you're having? I think it'll make for a fun weekend. But Solomon is really talented, and they've produced this literary horror that are asking questions, blending the unknown with horror elements and the real world. It's got all the elements of a good dystopian, asking questions about the real world, but it's actually a horror novel. And if it were a debut novel, a debut author who we knew nothing about, I think a lot of people would look at this book with a little bit more seriousness. But it's River Solomon who has a reputation, not a bad reputation, but a reputation as an author of a certain type of fiction. And I kind of think that's a silly reason to discount somebody from the long list. Ben Okri has written some very good children's books, but that doesn't mean we don't consider his novel likely to be longlisted. This is about 3 siblings who return to the house of their parents when they are unable to get in contact with them and find them dead. Was it suicide or was it something more sinister? This is a novel exploring the horrors of American society, but it also deals with the humans in this novel. Grief is a big theme, and so too is gender fluidity and queerness, as well as being a sibling. And I just think that this is a really well-rounded novel and something that I think very much could be a surprise on this year's long list. It is also the first of 3 queer novels I've included in my predictions. Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. A remote village in the north of England, 2 18-year-old boys meet. Our protagonist James has just realised he's gay when he meets Luke, somebody who just accepts him. James thinks he's found a kindred soul and a deep crush forms. Yet Luke, who is much bolder and brasher and less likely to care about other people's opinions, won't come out of the closet. He won't kiss James, and James certainly isn't doing that. Luke comes from a broken home. He has a bad boy reputation. He certainly knows how to have a good time. Obviously, this is a novel about first love, not knowing, and the fear of coming out. But there's also this desire to not be the only gay in the village, to have a sense of community. It captures that fear of coming out and at the same time examines heteronormativity. James and Luke are 2 very likeable characters, and they're both going through a lot, and I think Hewitt's triumph is in capturing their feelings and emotions. It is very obvious what James wants out of this relationship, and part of that is because it's told from his point of view. It's also very obvious what he gets from this relationship, but it's much harder to see what Luke is getting, and Hewitt has to be really intelligent with his writing here. He needs to keep true to James's views while breadcrumbing us readers into a different conclusion. With everything else that is going on in their lives, this could be about anything, but ultimately this is a novel about the importance of friendship. Both James and Luke get so much out of the friendship, and I think most importantly they get acceptance out of it. The blurb of this book compares it to Garth Greenwell and Douglas Stewart. I definitely think it's a bit more Greenwell than it is Stewart, maybe 2/3 to 1/3, but I think that's probably a fair comparison. Quite a nuanced and beautiful book, and I've saved the book that I am least sure about being longlisted for last. But it's not the quality of the work that has me questioning my prediction of this novel. Rather, the question is it a novel? Stag Dance by Tori Peters. This is a novella with 3 short stories. And I do think if the judges do longlist this book, they should clarify if they are judging just the titular novella or the entire offering of the book. However, if you haven't read this yet, you should just read the entire book. It is absolutely amazing. Before I discuss the book's themes and merit and all of that sort of thing, I just want to make it clear why I've erred on the side of this novel being included. But I also want to categorically state that I'm only sort of 60-40, 70-30, that sort of ratio, that this is eligible. I'm aware I have a very tenuous argument here, so I'm very happy for you to disagree with me. I mean, I'm always happy for you to disagree with me about my opinions, but on this one, I think I could easily be persuaded that this isn't eligible. In 2023, we saw If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery get longlisted. Actually, I think it got shortlisted. And that was marketed very differently in the US and in the UK. On Escoffery's website, he called it a collection of short stories centered on a Jamaican family, while HarperCollins, the UK publisher, called it a deeply moving, tragic comic debut novel. Stag Dance is been marketed as one novel and 3 stories. Serpent's Tail, the publisher is calling it a quartet of tales, neither labelling it a novel or a collection. The Booker Prize states that every submitted work must be unified and substantial, and I would argue that Stag Dance is thematically linked. Now, I acknowledge that thematic linking as opposed to character or plot linking is tenuous at best, but I think that is more correct than it is incorrect. Now, in these situations of disputed eligibility, the Booker chief executive decides if a book is eligible. That is Gabby Wood, and she has been in the role for the last 11 years. As such, she allowed If I Survive You to be shortlisted. So I'm thinking that she's at least a little bit more on the liberal side of this debate and is more inclined to let Stag Dance through than she is to object to it. Anyway, that's a lot of talk about a book and very little substance. The 4 tales of this book are all different genres with different characters. They're all about trans friendship, with each section focusing on at least one trans character. What I love about the linking of stories is that you can see the themes repeat themselves, but you can also use those themes to help see things in the stories that you may not have realized already. For example, trans friendship being such a central theme in these stories. But in the story The Chaser, where is the second trans character? You can't have trans friendship without having 2 trans characters. And this was something I only realized a little after reading this book, and what a powerful realization that is. Look for the trans characters in The Chaser. Peters includes a lot of Easter eggs, so if you like to cut the text apart and find those things, there's stuff for you. The titular novella, Stag Dance, is centered on an illegal lumberjacking operation where, to let off steam, the lumberjacks have a dance. Now, you can't have a dance with just men, so some of the men need to volunteer as women. When the strongest and broadest lumberjack in town, the Babe, volunteers, he or she, I'm really confused about which pronoun to use in the case of changing in time before they're out of the closet, finds himself in competition with a pretty young, tiny lumberjack. This provides us with a great dynamic for Peters to discuss gender euphoria and dystopia. But also, Peters is examining so much more. I love that these hyper-masculine lumberjacks, who in one case has visible snot on their own shirt from picking their nose, I love that these men who would never hit on another man suddenly feel like they're allowed to because they're women for the dance. Peters is on one hand showing us that gender and sexuality is a social construct, showing us that it bends, that it's not set, showing us the boxes we crave to fit into and the need for social acceptance. But on the other hand, she's showing us why transness threatens bigots and homophobes. She's showing us where violence against trans people comes from. She has such a deep and wonderful understanding of human nature. I love how Peters varies her prose for the characters she is writing to. With just a few quick sentences, she stands on the shoulders of our assumptions and lets us fill in the gaps of these characters. We know who and where her characters are instantly. And then, going from that stereotype, she builds her characters by introducing their vulnerabilities. She's colouring in the detail, if you like, adding depth to your assumptions. It's such efficient and intelligent writing. I've said it before, there are 5 reasons people like books. But Peters is making a complete mockery of that. She knows that all 5 elements are linked. Her prose make her characters good. Her characters make the plot good. The plot, the themes, and all 4 elements build the setting. And they're all done amazingly. I read Peters' first book, Detransition Baby, and I thought it was a very good book. I expected to like Stag Dance. I very much didn't expect this. This book is so good. This is the sign of a future great author. That's right, I just said America's next great author is, at least in my opinions, a trans woman. So that is my long list. That is my 13 books. Just to remind you, I'll be creating a more speculative version of this video. Basically, I just want to discuss books that sound great and have a bit of a bookish geek out. So if that sounds of interest to you, subscribe, like this video, and do all of those sort of nice things. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.